But here I am, trying to make sense of what just happened. I'm 29, and I've been with my girlfriend, Emma, for almost 4 years. We met through friends in college, clicked instantly, and it felt effortless. We've never had kids, lived in a small apartment in the city, and for the most part, things were good. Too good, maybe. Lately, though, things started feeling off. She became more distant, glued to her phone, disappearing for hours with vague excuses about work or meeting friends. At first, I tried to ignore it, thinking I was just being paranoid. But then there were little things. Unexplained texts that she quickly deleted, a sudden need for privacy, and that look she gave me sometimes, like she was somewhere else entirely. It wasn't huge, nothing I could really point to and say she's cheating. But my gut told me something was wrong. And deep down, I knew I had to find out before it completely destroyed me from the inside. I'll never forget the day I found out. It was one of those random Sunday afternoons. I was home alone, and Emma had gone out with friends. I didn't plan on snooping, I really didn't, but something inside me snapped. I grabbed her phone, and there it was. Messages. Explicit, flirty, intimate, not just a one-time thing. It wasn't with some random stranger. It was my best friend, Mark. My chest went cold, my hands started shaking, and the world felt like it had been ripped out from under me. Every inside joke, every time we all hung out together, it was all a lie. I remember reading the messages over and over, trying to convince myself it was some mistake. But it wasn't. The words were clear, the dates matched up. They'd been seeing each other for months, right under my nose. And in that moment, I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or throw the phone across the room. I felt betrayed, humiliated, heartbroken all at once. I couldn't sit on it any longer. That evening, when Emma came back, I confronted her. My voice was shaky, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Emma, we need to talk. Now. She looked at me, confused at first, but the moment she saw the look in my eyes, her face changed. I showed her the messages. I watched her pale, the color draining from her face. There was a silence, so heavy it could suffocate. And then she tried to explain. She said it started as something harmless, that had just happened, that she didn't know how to stop it. She cried, begged for understanding, tried to blame circumstances. But every word felt hollow, like a weak patch over a crack that had already shattered everything. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to disappear. I couldn't believe it. My best friend, my girlfriend, both lying to me while I trusted them completely. I couldn't even form the words to tell her how much it hurt. After she left that night, I was alone with my thoughts, and it was unbearable. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every corner of our apartment reminded me of her, of us, of everything I thought was real. My mind kept replaying the messages, the laughter we shared, the casual touches that now felt like lies. I felt a storm of emotions I didn't know how to handle. Anger burned hot in my chest, aimed at both of them, at Emma for betraying me, at Mark for stabbing me in the back. But beneath the anger was a deep, crushing sadness. I kept asking myself, was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? The doubts gnawed at me relentlessly. I started drifting through my days like a ghost. Every laugh I heard felt fake. Every happy couple I saw felt like a mirror of what I had lost. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk. I just wanted the world to pause, to rewind, to erase the pain. But somehow in the darkness, a small voice whispered, I need to decide what comes next. I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. After days of torment, I realized I couldn't keep floating in that haze of anger and heartbreak. I had to decide, either try to salvage something from a wreckage or walk away before it destroyed me completely. I met Emma in a quiet cafe, somewhere neutral. The air between us was heavy with unspoken words. She apologized again, tears in her eyes, promising it would never happen again, begging me to consider working on us. I listened, but every fiber of me was screaming. Trust had been shattered, and no amount of apologies could fix what they had done. I looked at her, at the woman I had loved for years, and I made my choice. I told her that I needed to leave, to heal, and that I couldn't do it with her. It wasn't easy, and I didn't expect her to understand. I felt a mix of relief and emptiness at the same time. Relief that I was reclaiming my life, emptiness for the loss of the future I had imagined with her. Walking away was the hardest thing I've ever done. But deep down, I knew it was the only way I could survive this betrayal without losing myself entirely. The first few days after leaving Emma felt surreal. I'd come home to an empty apartment that once felt like ours, and the silence was deafening. Every little thing reminded me of her. Her mug in the sink, the blanket she always left on the couch, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. I wanted to throw everything away, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. It all felt like holding on to ghosts. I kept replaying the moments over and over in my head. The betrayal, the lies, the faces of both her and Mark. I questioned myself endlessly. Was I too trusting? Did I miss signs? Could I have stopped it? The answers didn't bring comfort. They only deepened the ache in my chest. Friends tried to reach out, but I pushed them away. Talking felt impossible. I wasn't just grieving a relationship. I was grieving a version of my life I thought I had, one that was built on trust that had been shattered. Nights were the worst. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of loneliness pressing down, suffocating me. Yet, somewhere in that emptiness, a tiny spark of resolve began to grow. I didn't know it then, but those days alone would become the foundation for me to rebuild myself. It wasn't just Emma I had lost. I had also lost Mark, my best friend, the guy I trusted more than anyone in the world. I couldn't even bring myself to call him at first. Every memory of us hanging out, laughing, planning trips, now felt like a lie. Eventually, I forced myself to meet him. I needed answers, or maybe just to scream at him, to let him feel a fraction of the pain he caused me. He looked guilty, but also strangely calm, like he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. No excuses could cover what he did. He apologized, tried to explain that it just happened, and that he didn't mean for it to hurt me, but the words felt like ashes in my mouth. I realized then that betrayal doesn't just destroy trust. It destroys the lens through which you see every connection you've ever had. Friendship, love, loyalty. All of it became fragile, uncertain. Mark and I would never be the same. And even if he wanted to make amends, I wasn't sure I wanted him in my life again. That night, I sat alone, realizing the depth of the void that had been left behind, not just from a lover, but from someone I called a brother. The weeks that followed were brutal. I kept myself busy with work, gym, anything to avoid the silence of my apartment. But when night fell, loneliness hit me like a tidal wave. The betrayal had left a scar that made it impossible to feel safe with anyone, or even with myself. I realized that trust had become a fragile thing inside me, something I couldn't give freely anymore. Every message, every call, every friendly smile sparked a tiny panic. I kept imagining the worst, anticipating lies before they even happened. It was exhausting. I hated that I felt so hollow, so raw, but I couldn't rush myself to move on like everyone told me. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights I cried until my body ached. Other nights, I stared at the ceiling, angry at the world for letting people I loved betray me. I felt like I was learning a new language, the language of caution, suspicion, and the harsh reality that some people aren't who they appear to be. Yet, in the solitude, I began to understand something painful but true. If I ever wanted to trust again, I had to rebuild myself first. Not for Emma, not for Mark, but for me. After weeks of raw pain, I decided I couldn't stay trapped in that dark loop forever. I started small. I went for long walks in the city, just to feel the air on my face and remind myself I was still alive. I reconnected with a few friends I hadn't seen in months, not to drown my sadness, but just to exist outside my own head. I started journaling, spilling every thought and emotion onto paper. It was messy, ugly, painful, but honest. Reading back, I realized how much I had suppressed over the years. Doubts, fears, small resentments. Betrayal had forced everything to the surface. And maybe that was the only silver lining. I also forced myself to confront memories of Emma and Mark, not to relive the pain, but to accept it. I wasn't ready to forgive, and maybe I never would fully. But I could acknowledge what happened, feel the hurt, and still take steps forward. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some days I felt strong, like I could breathe again. Other days, the sadness and anger returned like a storm I couldn't outrun. But every small step, every honest thought, was a reminder that I still had myself, and that maybe, eventually, that would be enough. Months passed, and slowly, I began venturing back into the world. I met new people, colleagues, acquaintances, even a few potential friends. At first, every interaction felt tense. I measured every word, every smile, every gesture, afraid of being hurt again. But I realized something. Isolating myself didn't protect me. It trapped me in the past. I started taking small risks, like sharing a joke or a thought with someone new. It felt terrifying. I wanted to pull back, to retreat into the comfort of solitude, but I forced myself to stay. Slowly, I noticed glimmers of something I hadn't felt in months: connection. Not love, not intimacy, just the warmth of human interaction that wasn't marred by betrayal. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks. Old memories would resurface, old doubts would creep in. But each time I let myself open up, even just a little, I realized I was reclaiming pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. Eventually, I reached a point where I could think of Emma and Mark without my chest tightening in panic. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acceptance. I accepted that what happened was real, that they had chosen betrayal, and that it had nothing to do with my worth as a person. I began to let go of the endless what-ifs and why me. Those questions had haunted me for months, but holding on to them only chained me to the pain. Acceptance didn't erase the scars, they still ached, but it allowed me to stop fighting the past and start focusing on the future. I realized I could still love, still trust, still connect, even if it would take time. I could let myself feel again without fear of being crushed. Acceptance wasn't a final step. It was a first step toward reclaiming my life and understanding that my story wasn't defined by their betrayal. With acceptance slowly settling in, I started reclaiming parts of my life that had been buried under months of pain. I revisited hobbies I'd abandoned, cooked meals just for myself, and spent weekends exploring corners of the city I'd never noticed before. It was small, almost mundane, but every little act reminded me that life could still hold joy. I even laughed again, awkwardly at first, then more freely. It felt strange, almost guilty, but I allowed myself to feel it. The apartment no longer felt like a tomb. It became a space where I could be myself, without shadows lurking in every corner. The memories of Emma and Mark still lingered, of course. Sometimes I would think of them and feel a pang, a flash of anger or sadness. But the difference now was that those feelings no longer ruled me. I could acknowledge them, let them pass, and still keep moving forward. I realized that reclaiming life wasn't about forgetting betrayal. It was about building resilience, rediscovering self-worth, and choosing to exist fully despite the hurt. After months of healing, I tentatively opened myself to the idea of new connections. Not romance, at least not yet, but friendships, casual outings, small moments of trust. It felt like walking on thin ice. I was hyper-aware that betrayal had left deep cracks in my ability to trust. Still, I met people who reminded me that not everyone was capable of such cruelty. Simple gestures, a friend checking in, a colleague offering support, even strangers being kind, slowly rebuilt the bridge I thought was burned forever. I realized that letting myself feel, letting myself care again, was not weakness. It was courage. Each small step, each cautious conversation, was a rebellion against the pain Emma and Mark caused. I was reclaiming trust on my terms, and it was liberating in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was a delicate process. Some days, doubt would creep in, and I'd question whether I'd ever be whole again. But each time I chose connection over isolation, I proved to myself that healing was possible, even after the deepest betrayal. By now, I had come to understand something crucial. My worth was never defined by someone else's betrayal. Emma and Mark's actions reflected their choices, not my value. I began to see the experience not just as pain, but as a brutal teacher, forcing me to confront who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. I reflected on boundaries, trust, and the importance of listening to my instincts. I realized that love and friendship are precious, but they require discernment. Being cautious didn't mean shutting people out. It meant protecting the fragile parts of myself until I was strong enough to engage fully again. I started journaling my insights, talking to friends, and even mentoring someone going through a breakup. Sharing my story gave it weight beyond my own suffering. It became a testament to resilience. I was no longer the person defined by betrayal. I was someone stronger, wiser, and more attuned to what truly mattered. Looking back, I can see now that betrayal is a wound that cuts deep, but it doesn't have to define the rest of your life. It taught me the harshest lessons about trust, love, and friendship, but it also revealed my resilience, my capacity to heal, and my ability to reclaim my life. If there's one thing I could tell anyone going through something similar, it's this: allow yourself to feel every emotion. Don't rush the process, and don't blame yourself for the choices of others. Betrayal is theirs, not yours. Protect your heart, but don't shut it down forever. Life is still full of connection, laughter, and moments worth embracing. I'm not the same person I was before Emma and Mark, and that's okay. I've learned to value myself, to trust cautiously, and to seek relationships that honor honesty and care. Pain shaped me, but it didn't break me. And now, slowly, I'm learning to live fully again,